Hey everyone, Jake here for American Muscle, and in this video we're taking a look at the BMR Independent Rear Suspension Subframe Support Brace in red, fitting 2015 and newer Mustangs. If you've got an S550 or S650 Mustang and you find yourself hitting the limits of grip in the rear end, this kit is going to be for you. As the name implies, this is going to help reinforce your rear subframe, and it makes a dramatic improvement in the way your car handles and puts down the power. And it's especially impressive considering the price. The move to independent rear suspension has been a boon for Mustang owners for a number of reasons. Better ride quality, better handling, and a litany of other things. But as with anything in life, it's not without compromises. Since independent rear suspensions have more moving parts and bushings, there are more places for movement to be introduced into the entire assembly. And stock rubber bushings can wear and allow a bit more movement than many of us would like. And that can lead to things like sloppy handling or a ton of wheel hop when you go to put the power down. Now the solve here is to reinforce some of those weak points, and BMR has got the answer. You get two sets of braces here. So these larger ones are going to connect the subframe itself to the frame rails of the car, while the others here are going to connect the cradle to the structure of the car in other areas. Now both of these reinforcements are going to help quell excess movement in the subframe, especially during hard launches and cornering. The net result here is less movement in the subframe itself, so the whole car is going to move as one. That means less wheel hop when you drop the hammer from a stop, and you're going to get less of a following sensation when you turn into a corner. So if you turn the wheel in, the front end will move and the rear will follow in suit. It's not going to be a delay when you turn that wheel. So you're not going to feel like that rear end is following or lagging behind you at all. And if you're a person who values handling above all else like I am, this kit is truly a game changer. Now both sets of braces here are constructed using heavy-duty steel plate, and they're fully welded together for extra strength. You've got additional supports and gussets here to help keep everything in place while you're hucking your car around. Now these things are pretty darn solid, and they're also of course finished off with this bright red powder coat finish for added protection against the elements. You also get all the hardware you need included in the kit, making it a pretty straightforward installation process, but we'll talk more about that in a moment. First though, the price. Coming in at about $300 for the kit, this is a darn good value for something that can make such a big improvement in how your car drives. And while you're going to have to do a bit of work to get this installed, it's a small amount of money to pay for a big improvement. Installation is going to get a 2 out of 3 on our difficulty meter, and the job should take you around 4 hours to complete. Now everything here is just going to bolt on. You don't have to modify anything on the car itself, but you are going to have to get down in there and do some disassembly in order to get these pieces fitted. Fear not though, we're going to walk you through that process step by step right now, so let's head out to the shop.
The tools you'll need for this project are a 1/2-inch impact gun or a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, a long extension, a 1/2-inch swivel joint, a 13, a 15, a 19 millimeter socket, a shallow and a deep 21 millimeter socket, and an 18 millimeter wrench. Hi everyone, today we're installing a subframe support brace on our Mustang, so let's get started. So before we get started, you want to make sure that the vehicle is supported by a set of jack stands or on a lift such as what we've got by the pinch welds underneath the vehicle. You're also going to need some support to go underneath the cradle for the IRS, because you are going to be removing bolts that hold the cradle to the body. Now, that being said, the tolerances on this kit are very tight. So once you start into this, if you think it's not going to fit, give it a little patience and a little bit more time, and things will actually fit just the way that they're supposed to. So let's get started. All right, so we're underneath the vehicle, right in front of the rear tire on the driver's side, just to give you a reference of where we're at. There are 2 holes that are threaded right here in a rocker panel that we're going to be mounting the brace to. There's also a hole in this cross member here right behind, or should say right in front of, the camber arm that goes underneath the vehicle. So there's a support plate here that mounts the cradle to the vehicle. We're going to be loosening this 21 millimeter bolt here and removing these 2 13 millimeter bolts here before we actually get to the install. So let's get that taken care of. So we're just going to loosen this one up with our 21 mil socket. And we're going to remove these 2 13 millimeter bolts here. Now the support braces are side specific, so when you look at them, you'll see that there is a long brace that goes vertical on the brace. This goes towards the inside of the vehicle, towards the drive shaft. Now, the other thing is we're going to be installing this from the rear side first, and that's going to go up into this cross member right behind the big 21mm bolt that we just loosened up. So to install this, what you're going to do is take this long bolt that's supplied in the kit and put a thin silver washer on the bolt itself. And we're going to insert that into the rear side of our support brace. And then we're going to take one of the thicker gold washers, put it on top of the brace here, and then we're going to go ahead and insert this spacer into the cross member and then put another thick gold washer on top of the cross member, and then we'll put the nut on top of that. All right, so we already got our bolt into our support brace, put our spacer into the cross member, then we'll install our bolt that's already through our support brace. So this next part, you're going to be working blind because you have to put one of the thick washers on top of the cross member over the bolt that we just installed. Now, once you've done that, then we can install the nut on top of that. All right, now like I said, you are working blind up here, so once you've got your washer on top, then you've got to feel your way around to find the bolt and put the nut on. Now we're not going to tighten this down just yet until we get the rest of it installed. All right, now we can install two of the supplied bolts in the kit in these front two holes of the brace here. Now we're going to go ahead and replace the two 13mm bolts that we took out of the factory brace here with two supplied bolts in the kit. So we're just going to go ahead and get those put back into place. And now we're going to tighten up our 21mm bolt here that we loosened earlier. All right, now again, we're working blind on this rear bolt here. So we're going to use an 18mm wrench to get up there and hold the nut on the end of our bolt. Now once you've got the wrench on there, go ahead and use your 19mm socket to tighten it down. Now we can tighten down the two 15mm bolts at the front of our brace and the two from our factory brace. Now we're ready to install our rear brace, which is going to go underneath the cradle mount and the sway bar mounting points right here behind the rear diff. So to do this, we're going to have to remove the 21mm bolt over here for the cradle mount and also the two 13mm bolts that hold the sway bar up to the cradle. So let's go ahead and get that done so that we can get our brakes installed. Now you also want to remember at this point, you definitely want to have some sort of support underneath the cradle right next to your control arm to make sure that it doesn't drop down when you remove that bolt. All right, now we're ready to install our rear brace. And because of the fact that we're reusing our stock bushings on this install, we're going to be using the spacer that's provided in the kit with the brackets. If you happen to purchase the BMR lockout kit, then you'll be using the spacer that is included with that kit, which is completely different from this one. So this is going to go onto the flat spacer here on the brace. These two holes are going to go where the sway bar mount bolts were that we just took. So it's going to go underneath the sway bar bracket. This is going to go between the brace and the stock bushing. So let's go ahead and get this installed. Now we're also going to install the supplied bolts for our sway bar mount. All right, now we'll tighten everything back up. And now we'll tighten up our sway bar mount bolts with our 15mm socket. And now you can repeat that whole process for the other side.
That's going to wrap it up here for our review and install of the BMR Independent Rear Suspension Subframe Support Brace in red, fitting 2015 and newer Mustangs. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, for all things Mustang, be sure to keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.